Good evening. I'd like to call the November 19th, 2013 regular meeting of the West Hartford Board of Education to order. Krista, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Katz?
Here.
Mrs. Ma?
Here.
Dr. Overmeyer-Velazquez?
Here.
Mr. Putterman?
Here.
Mr. Sarzan?
Here.
Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Mr. Zaidanowitz?
Here.
Student Representative Rhonda Griffin? Here. Student Representative Jordan Gelber?
Here.
Rhonda, I think it's your turn. Will you lead us in the pledge, please? Well, tonight is a very bittersweet night where we say goodbye to two colleagues and friends, and we welcome two other colleagues and friends. Before we get there, however, I would like to entertain a motion for a revision to the agenda order. The recommendation is that the order of the agenda be changed to put the following agenda items before unfinished business: recognition of outgoing board members, induction of newly elected board members, brief recess, new board members take their seats at the board table, and election of officers and board organization. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. Abstentions, that carries. All right, we do not have student participation tonight. We move on to public communications, which are comments from members of the public. Board members do not respond to comments. Each commenter is allowed 3 minutes per individual. Is there anybody who would like to address the board this evening? Come on up, please state your name and address.
Good evening, Linda DiNapoli, 214 Mohegan Drive. First, I'd like to congratulate both the outgoing and the incoming board members. May you all have gracious days ahead. I'd also like to make a note before I begin my public comments as to the difference when you come to a Board of Education meeting. You can actually stand here and you can speak to the audience, but when you go to a town council meeting, you have your back to the audience. So it's quite interesting, and I appreciate that you're doing that. Again, I'm here to say, as a senior citizen, I do not want you to allow the town council and the mayor to make this a me against them issue, where the seniors are always pitted against the parents. My son got an excellent education here, and I want all the parents to know I am willing to pay my fair share, and you pay attention to that when Mr. Milne comes up and gives his testimony, which I stand behind 100% and have for over 6 years, and stand behind the fact that neither one of us have gotten any assistance from the town council at all. So we're, want to make that clear. Also, I want to state that if you need money for the board, for the education budget, I want you people to go to the town council meetings and ask them why they haven't collected the $2.2 million outstanding property taxes, the $2 million outstanding personal property taxes, and the over $1 million in violation and parking tickets. We have people who are making in excess of $123,000 a year, which would be approximately $75,000 in salary, $54,000 in benefits, generating all this paper, but never getting the money. So if you need money, you know where to get it. You have to show up at the town council meetings, and you have to put them on the carpet to try to get those funds. Maybe with the election over now and everybody doesn't have to play nice, they'll actually do something, although Mr. Milne and I have been through a number of election cycles and nothing has really happened. And that's really all I have to say. I wish you well in your mission, and I hope to see some of the citizens come out. The other one thing I do want to say is I was very surprised that the council chamber was overflowing about Syria, and I have no political agenda relative to Syria. However, when it comes to our own town and the misuse and abuse, in my opinion, of the funds, almost nobody shows up. So it's time, folks at home and folks in the room, to come and at least give the benefit to all these people who donate their time on both the council and the Board of Education, and the people who come and speak, the graciousness of showing up.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Mill.
Robert Milne, 3 Sage Road. In the interest of fairness and all of that which supports this great school system, I offer the following. Property assessed 2006 comes on the market, is being assessed by the town as $677,000. I'm going to round to the nearest thousand to expedite the process. Again, 2006, it gets assessed for about $677,000. Because of the phase-in rules, the property value is lowered to $579,000. See the drop? 2011, the property is assessed for $635,000, less than what is assessed in 2006, and more than the reval. To go from $579,000 to $635,000, you have to ask yourself, how did that happen? I think most of us, when we look at our properties, know that our property values over from year to year do not fluctuate like this. November 11th, 2013, the property comes on the market for just under $1.1 million. I repeat, the property comes on the market for just under $1.1 million. After being lowered because of the phase-in rules to $579,000. How do you explain this? If you love this school system, you should want to contribute. If you love this town, you should want to contribute. This should be an exercise of passing the buck to somebody else. I think this town is worth paying your fair share of taxes, regardless of the politics, regardless of those who particularly choose not to pay their fair share. Everyone should be willing to pay their fair share based upon value. It's an ad valorem tax. Let's contrast that to another situation. Property assessed in 2006 for $259,000. 2008, because of the phase-in rules, it's lowered to $195,000. 2011, the assessment's at $234,000. 2011, grand list, October 1st, 2011, now goes up to $234,000. 2 years later, October 15th, the property comes on the market of $248,000. And before you, that's just a listing. That's just an offering. That property hasn't been sold. When you consider the cost of selling a property, commissions and everything else, how do you explain? Take these two situations, and how does anyone, how an assessor would stand here before you and explain how in the world do you get here? Who do you think is paying the tax? And why should you care? Why should you care? Because if you own a property of $300,000 or less, you're paying this tax on this property. You are paying for that share because the tax revenue doesn't fall off the table. It does get shifted to the innocent. Thank you and good luck to all.
Thank you, Mr. Mill. Is there anybody else who'd like to address the board? Ms. Bai, is it? Okay.
Good evening. What a pleasure to be here. I want to take a few moments to make sure I thank the outgoing board members because I have such admiration for them. Nowgone and I ran in opposite parties in 2001, and we were both seated on the board. And Nowgone, with you, it's never been about party. Now you sit as a Democrat. It's always been about the students. And I think you've particularly given teachers a voice as a teacher yourself, and you speak up for them quite often, and I know how much they appreciate that. And I first knew you as a parent and just a great advocate for your own kids. And watching you on the board, I see you bring that same advocacy for every student in the town. And you also really broke down barriers when you ran. And I think we're a role model for others to run. You never minded that you had an accent or that you were maybe felt different sometimes. You always were just a part of the board, and it was all about the kids. So I can't thank you enough for your service as a parent and as a former board member. And Shifting to Ellen. Ellen, you've been a great partner as well. I know we didn't serve together on the board, but you've certainly been someone who helped connect the state and the town. And I think something unknown to many people is how critical you were in making Charter Oak come to fruition, with some of your work working with the council, working with the Board of Ed, and working with the state, and using your incredible both legal and interpersonal skills to make sure that as you move forward as a district, that proposal worked for everyone. So I think you're an unsung hero in the Charter Oak, the move to have a new Charter Oak school. So thank you for that, and I think you leave schools with healthier lunches, and like Mrs. Ma, you're incredibly focused on students and making sure the teachers have the tools they need and be able to meet the classroom needs. So with that, I just want to thank you, and I know there's a bright future. We had 3 new electeds, and I know it's sort of like after I come out of a high school class or an elementary school class, how excited I am about the future. It's sort of how I feel today with the new board. We're going to really miss these board members, so I'm sure they'll stay in touch, but we're really excited about the new board members. So we're lucky to have a community where people are willing to volunteer their time and expertise, and mostly their passion for kids. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to address the board? Ms. Kindle.
Claire Kindle, 46 Bishop Road. I am here to just say congratulations to the entire board, both the outgoing and the incoming, but particularly to give grief and to also gratitude to my running mates, Ellen Katz and Nagan Ma. All of us ran to make a difference. And I think Ellen Katz is a absolute classic example of what happens when one mom gets angry and says class sizes are too high. My kids are in classes with too many kids and too few teachers, and I plan to make a difference. And watch out, world. Here she is now after serving very honorably on the board and making a big difference, now off to being consumer counsel and off to other things, but not necessarily better things. As someone who has served on the board for 5 years and is now on the council, I will tell you, don't tell anybody, I really miss the board. That the board is just a fabulous place to be. And Nagan Ma, what can you say about a woman who didn't have to run, could have said, nope, I've done my time, I've worked on the board, I've served, and then decides that, you know what, I think I have more to offer. And we are all the richer for it. Nagan's wisdom, her absolutely wicked sense of humor, but also her ability to get to the heart of the matter. And by that I mean the true heart of the matter, right where your gut is. It's like, this is where our values are, this is why it's important that we're here. And so I think you will find that there's a lot of life after the board, but that the time serving on the board is a precious thing. You make a difference, it matters, and I thank you for your service.
Thank you. Very gracious, everybody. Anybody else? Is there anybody else who would like to address the board before we move on? All right. One thing I should note is that the reason Karen List is not here this evening is that she is at the Bushnell introducing John Mastriani, who is being celebrated as Connecticut's Teacher of the Year. And so she wishes she could be here this evening, but we have Mr. Moore warming up in her place. All right, we move on to recognition of outgoing board members. And we are going to start with Mark Overmeyer Velasquez.
I have the happy task of recognizing Nagan Ma out of order in the revised agenda, but nonetheless, my pleasure. I would like to recognize Ellen Katz as well, but we'll save that to that moment. So Nagan, compassionate, empathetic, and inspirational come quickly to mind as attributes of Naogan Ma, fellow board member, community leader, teacher, parent. As I prepared for my first meeting with Ms. Ma 2 years ago, her presence on the board and her past, sometimes storied, was both impressive and somewhat intimidating. Who was this Trinity College language professor, one-time Republican turned Democrat, who managed to carve out her own unique path to leadership beyond ideological division as a staunch advocate for students, families, and teachers? A native of Inner Mongolia, refugee of China's Cultural Revolution, and yet another one of those new Americans that has brought such rich experience and knowledge to this country. As a resident of West Hartford for over 2 decades, she and her husband, Xiaozhang, raised and guided their children, Amy and David, through our town's public schools. As all of us sitting at this table know well, Naogan's family deserves our immense respect and gratitude for their support and encouragement. In addition to her immediate family's generosity, I have been struck by how Naogan has cultivated an extended family among other town officials and committee members. Our goodbyes started in the summer with a number of bittersweet farewell speeches filled with gratitude and genuine friendship. I know that in particular, Ellen Katz and Claire Kindle have been fellow travelers along Naogan's political and personal journey. As a recipient of an undergraduate and graduate degrees from the prestigious Wesleyan University, Naogan joined and then won election to the board as its first combined cultural, linguistic, and national border crosser, paving the way for similar transnational kinfolk seeking to bring our schools into resonance with a rapidly diversifying global West Hartford community. As someone who knows firsthand the delicate, ever-emerging nature of democracy, of democratic practice, Naogan has also been a tireless champion of access, opportunity, and giving voice to all our residents in all their many languages. And Naogan, I want to thank you. I need to thank you for your inspiration, guidance, for challenging me and others, raising the bar, and demanding honest answers to difficult questions. You are a courageous and caring leader whose influence and impact have made our schools better places to learn, work, and play. And with your permission, 谢谢你为我们的好服务，谢谢你为我们的好服务，你是一个很好的老师，我们一定会想你。Thank you for your excellent work. Thank you for being such a wonderful teacher. We will sincerely miss you.
A+ for your Chinese.
I'm sorry, I did go out of order, so sorry for confusing you. Terry?
Man, I'm glad I don't have to speak Chinese to say goodbye to you. All right. I'm also glad that you chose to wear red tonight. You know, look at the rest of us kind of drab, and here you are standing out, bringing color and life to this place. And it makes me think of the very first place that I saw you and said, geez, she'd make a really good Board of Ed member. And of course you were standing right there, standing up there, advocating, fighting for the thing that you have never stopped fighting for all of these years, smaller class sizes, teaching us, cajoling us, reminding us that it really did matter to you as a parent how many kids were in your children's class. And you've never stopped. I mean, it's an example of your commitment to advocacy for what you think is very, very necessary and vital for the students in this town. And this board has benefited from that, from your diligence, from your creativity, from your tenaciousness. We've all been aware of all of those attributes that you have brought to bear over these last 4 years. It's interesting that both Claire and Beth showed up to share some of their insights, because they mentioned the things that certainly come to those of us who work with you, come to our minds when we think about your tenure on the board. I was never one that ate lunch at schools. I always brown bagged it myself. But I bet everybody that goes and has lunch these days is benefiting from some of the advocacy that you've left in your wake for better food, more nutritious food, more tasty food, and that matters. That is a fight worth having. And as is always the case with your advocacy, you involved other people. You looked to the resources that were available, and West Hartford certainly has a tremendous number of resources, and you brought them to bear, and look at these spectacular events such as the one last week at Hall with the chefs that come in from all over. Most folks don't realize it, but up here we do. That has Ellen Katz's name stamped all over it, and behind the scenes, but very, very much alive. But to me, the legacy that I care about more than anything else, again, already mentioned by Beth, and I don't think visible to very many people, but we're building a new Charter Oak school, and I know for a fact that might not have been possible were it not for the work that you and Claire, behind the scenes, quietly, tenaciously, diligently, all of those adjectives, managed to get people to work together for something really spectacular. And I will think of that every time I drive by that new building when it opens. We're all looking forward to it. So I think we're all sorry to see you go because you are such a tenacious advocate for the good things, the things that we haven't necessarily imagined yet, but that we need to. And I guess what I would say is that the only thing that makes it a little better is that, in my mind at any rate, is that the reason you're going is that instead of being an advocate just for the students and our town, you're now an advocate for people across the entire state. So we're losing you, and the state and all of the people in the state are gaining you for that reason. And I think that's not a bad trade-off at all. So thank you and for your service. Thank you for all of the adjectives that we've all laid out, and we will miss you.
In the interest of time, we're not planning on everybody speaking to everybody, but I didn't want to not offer you the opportunity. Okay. Ellen, rebuttal.
Well, you guys know I couldn't not take the microphone one more time. I do first want to thank Bruce Putterman and Terry Schmidt and Claire Kindle, because if you hadn't read class size guidelines in 2007, which resulted in my sons having 28 kids in their elementary school classes, I probably wouldn't have gotten involved in this whole Board of Ed business. And looking at the last 4 years, I am amazed and proud at what we've accomplished together. And I made a list, and I will run through it quickly, but we adopted a new mission, which is up there. We passed a budget during difficult economic times through a referendum on the first vote, which was the first time that had been done in decades. We secured funding and approval for a new Charter Oak. We have a new technology plan. We have a new emphasis on diversity in hiring. There has been a sharp focus on class size guidelines. We have responded to no emphasis on evolving educational standards, Common Core, new Smarter Balance assessment, and teacher evaluation. And we've become a leader in Connecticut on all these issues. There's all the various best of accolades to the town, with all of which have a heavy emphasis on our school system. We've had 2 Connecticut Teachers of the Year, one of whom is being honored tonight. We've implemented a model of continuous improvement, implemented SRBI, secured lights for the schools, the high schools. There's been the Growing Great Schools movement. I promise you guys I did try to work on Tasty as well. We have 2 of the top 10 high schools in the state, and something like the top 2% of the whole United States, according to U.S. News and World Report. So who's going to argue with them? We've begun a discussion of mental health issues and engaging community providers, which is a process I hope to stay involved in. And we have hired a new superintendent through a collaborative, streamlined process. And I have to also talk about relationships. I mean, we've got this incredible relationship among the board. We've got a great relationship with town council, which has not always been historically that, but there's a great deal of trust. And when I talk to board members in other parts of the state and other towns, it's not like that. So I think we should, again, as a board, feel really proud of that. We've got very strong relationships with our teachers' unions and other unions, all of whom took voluntary wage freezes during the so-called Great Recession. And I also want to just mention the things we've dealt with: major power outages, hurricanes, running a shelter out of our high school for, 11, 12 days, the horrible events of Sandy Hook, and of course the worst economic depression since the Great Depression. I'm also very proud of what we did do. We didn't decimate the schools or programs because of tough economic times, in large part because of those wage freezes we talked about, but because this board was committed to find a way not to do this, and the community supported it. So we didn't panic after the Sandy Hook shootings. I think we showed the community that we were on top of it. I will never forget the meeting with Tom Moore discussing where we already were on security. And we didn't let these events pull us apart. And the question I get most often is, how do you like being on the Board of Ed? And I honestly say I have enjoyed every minute of it. I'm leaving only because my current job prohibits me from running from office, so I'm sad, but I also know it's time for new people and new perspectives, and I'm very excited to welcome two extremely capable women in Tammy and Jillian. And the best part of being on the board is that my respect for our schools has only grown exponentially. The administration, Karen List, Tom Moore, Nancy DePalma, Chip Ward, Rick Ledwith, the entire team is just so impressive. And I've had the honor of working directly with people in so many roles, from teachers to coaches to media specialists to the cafeteria staff. And I believe you won't find a better school system in the state. And as for the board, Mark J. and your predecessors, Ellen Brazel and Leigh Brazel Spinella, I think we could show Washington a thing or two about working across party lines and working through differences, and in the end, remembering our mission and our focus, which is about the kids. I mean, this is not a political board in my mind. And to Bruce and Terry and Nagan and Mark and Claire, who previously shared these chairs, it has been such an honor to serve with you, to debate with you, and analyze, and occasionally cry, or a lot of laughs. Last week, I jokingly voted against approving the minutes. Sorry, Krista. But I wanted to be the one lone dissenting vote for once, because that's how well this board works. Most of the things are done by consensus, although in the end, what they told me when I came in is true. The calendar is the most contentious thing on the agenda every year. Finally, I want to say that this experience has demonstrated that you can make a difference, but you can only do it if you have the support of your family. To my sons, Zach and Justin, you are the reason I got into this in the first place. So thank you for always sharing your perspective as students and reminding me that your experience is in the end what matters most. And to my husband, Steve, who never, ever complained about the late nights away at meetings or the hours and hours this position takes, thank you for always supporting me and making this work. Everyone should be so lucky as to have this experience with these people.
Thank you. Melgan?
I have a pack of tissue, so I'm ready to go. But I'm not going to go there. I won't do that. But I thought, just in case I get too emotional. It is very emotional for me, as Beth mentioned. I've been involved since 2001, running against now Senator Best Buy back then. But what an opportunity back then. People are going to mention Republican, Democrat, but for my own experience, I don't have anything that I actually regret. I don't regret running before, tried again, and for the third time, I am very comfortable with what I'm doing as a Democrat. And so even though everybody wants to talk about before, but my experience being we need to work together. We really need to put our intelligence, put our resources, and whether it's Republican, Democrat, we need to make our school the best school possible. We need to make our town, and in fact, our country should be a much better place than we're experiencing now. We just need to put the party's affiliation aside and work together. And I want to thank everybody who supported me once upon a time when I was a Republican. I want to thank everybody who believed in me and supported me again when I ran as a Democrat. It took me from 2001 to 2009 to finally win. And why would you do that? It's because my husband and I, as Mark said, established ourselves in this country, our new country, for the same reason everybody else wants: a better life for our children, a better future for mankind. And I think after you accomplish having a home, having a great school to go to, the next thing you want to think about is there anything that I can do to make sure everything's still going well and better? And that's the reason I thought I could make some contribution. Mark, thank you so much for your remark. I don't know who you're talking about. It really doesn't sound like, it doesn't quite sound like me, but I'm very flattered, and I want to thank you, and thank you again. But I want to take this opportunity to really thank my extended family, my Grennan Road friends and family. They've been there for me every single time. They didn't care whether I was going to run for a Republican. They didn't, as a Republican candidate, they didn't care. They just said, we know you, and we think it would be important. So I never thank them enough, even though I see them all the time. But they are my extended family. And I will always forget to thank my husband. So thank you, Ellen, for reminding me. My husband and I have been married for 37, I think, maybe 36 years. And something like that, either 36 or 37. But he has always supported my craziness and everything I wanted to do. And I thank him for putting a leash on me and from time to time saying, think before you jump. So I thank you for that. And my children who never complained, why do you want to do this? You're embarrassing us. Or the kind of things you say at the Board of Ed meeting, we don't really want everybody to hear about that. And I do mention from time to time about my own experience with my children. But most importantly, this experience really helped me to feel as a true American that voting is a privilege. In the rest of the world, we don't have this privilege. And when we can cast our vote and be part of this big machine and selecting what the direction as a town, as a country that we're going in terms of being the world leader, that one vote is important. So I'm really glad that I was able to be part of this process, and I think I will pass on this experience to many generations following us. So I want to thank all the teachers who's been doing their job. It would be wrong for me not to mention teachers and everybody who works so hard to make this system work. And my colleagues on the board, I have served with, I think I see Jack Darcy there, who was the chair. And I want to mention, as I say goodbye, let's not forget about people before us on this board. They put a lot of foundations together for all of us to serve again. It doesn't happen in one day. And for the newcomers, it's been wonderful to get to know you, and I think you're all really amazing. I wish I could be like you. So wonderful, work together. And my current board, I always feel I'm with a group of people that a 10 minutes conversation always want to make me dig deeper, think harder, and do better. And you have made me a better person, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Naugan. Thank you, Ellen. Just briefly, you know, we all run for the board because of the kids. And yet at the same time, to run for a Board of Education, to run for public elective office, you have to have a little bit of ego. And, you know, that kind of translates into wanting to feel like you've, in fact, made a difference and left some footprints. And Ellen, I'm so glad that you read that. I mean, it was remarkable. We all did that together. And both of you spearheaded several of those initiatives, and I think the greatest thing that one can feel or one can say as one leaves public service is that you did make a difference. And so I, for one, truly appreciate that, and I know that everybody else on the board and in our community appreciates that as well. So now comes the time where we offer you your gift, and I've always found it kind of ironic that we give people who have so much energy and so much passion to do things for their community that we give them chairs. But nevertheless, you are getting chairs. And here they are. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. And you do not have to drag them out with you tonight. They will be shipped to your homes, as you know. And your packets, right. They'll be shipped to your homes, and perhaps you will put them in some prominent place in your homes. And each time you walk by them, you will have two of them, I believe. You already have one. A dining room set maybe is in the office. That each time you walk by your chair, you'll kind of have some evocative memory of the difference that you have made here on the Board of Ed. So we will miss you very much. Don't go anywhere, because for the moment we are going to move on to the induction of our newly elected board members. There are 5 newly elected board members. That's right. Yeah, newly elected means anybody who won in the last election, regardless of whether you have previously served on the board or not. So would Mark and Jay and Mark and Tammy and Jillian and Essie LeBreau, our town clerk, please come forward to be sworn in as members of the Board of Education for 4-year terms, although Mark is being sworn in to fill out the remainder of a 2-year term.
If there's any young family members that would like to come and stand next to me, I could use some help in giving out the certificates. Do you want to come over here? Come over here. Stand right here. Okay. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear that you will faithfully perform the duties as a member of the West Hartford Board of Education according to law and to the best of your abilities, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Essie. Congratulations to all of our newly elected members. We are going to take a 5-minute recess so that our outgoing members can leave their chairs, but move on, and so our new incoming members can assume their seats at the table. So we'll recess for 5 minutes. Okay, we resume. We move on to election of officers and board organization. Pursuant to Section 10-218 of the state statutes, Chapter 2, Section 4 of the Town Charter, and Section 8130 of the West Hartford School Code Policy, the Board of Education shall at this meeting elect a chair, vice chair, secretary, and 2 financial examiners, such persons to hold office for a period of 1 year. It is recommended that the election be conducted in accordance with the following procedure. Recommendation that Tom Moore act as temporary chairperson of this meeting for the purpose of electing a chairperson for the Board of Education. Tom Moore, Assistant Superintendent for Administration, will serve as temporary chairperson and will call for nominations and action for the position of chairperson. The newly elected chairperson will conduct the meeting. The newly elected chairperson will call for nominations and action for the election of the following officers: vice chairperson, secretary, and 2 financial examiners, 1 from each political party. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor of conducting the meeting as prescribed, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Abstentions? That carries unanimously. Mr. Moore, you are now the temporary chairperson of this meeting for the purpose of electing a chairperson for the Board of Education.
Yeah.
I hold all power right now. That's right.
Tom, you do have one power. You can fire yourself.
The meeting will please come to order. Nominations are now in order for the office of chairperson.
I would like to recommend for chair for the coming year, Bruce Putterman. That's a real nomination.
Mr. Putterman is nominated. Do I have a second?
I would like to second the nomination of Bruce Putterman to be chairman of the Board of Education.
Mr. Putterman is nominated. Are there any further nominations for the office of chairperson? If not, nominations are closed. Do I have a motion for a vote?
So moved.
Those in favor of Mr. Putterman for chairperson say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries. Congratulations, Mr. Putterman. You are the chairman of the board.
Thank you. All right, we move on to nominations for vice chairperson. Are there any nominations for vice chairperson of the board?
I would like to recommend for Vice Chairperson Mark Overmeyer Velasquez.
Is there a second?
A second.
Are there any further nominations for vice chairperson of the board? Hearing none, all in favor of Mark Overmeyer Velasquez being vice chairperson of the board, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anybody opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations, Mark. We now move on to nominations for secretary of the board. Are there any nominations for secretary of the Board of Education?
I would like to nominate Tammy Exum for Secretary of the Board of Education.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Are there any additional nominations for secretary of the Board of Education? Hearing none, all in favor of Tammy Exum serving as secretary of the Board of Education, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Abstentions? That carries. Congratulations. It's an onerous task. We now move on to nominations for Democratic Financial Examiner. Are there any nominations for Democratic Financial Examiner?
I would like to nominate Jillian Gilchrist as Financial Examiner, Democratic Party.
Is there a second?
I would like to second the nomination for Jillian Gilchrist as Financial Examiner.
Are there any additional nominations for Democratic Financial Examiner? Hearing none, all in favor of Jillian Gilchrist as Democratic Financial Examiner, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstentions? That carries. Congratulations, Jillian. We now move on to nominations for Republican Financial Examiner. Are there any nominations for Republican Financial Examiner?
I'd like to nominate Jay Sarzen for the Republican Financial Advisor.
Very good. Is there a second?
I will second Jay Sarzen for Financial Examiner.
Are there any other nominations for Republican Financial Examiner? Hey, gotta follow the rules. All right, hearing none, all in favor of nominating Jay Sarzen being Republican Financial Examiner for the coming year, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Abstentions? That carries as well. Congratulations to all of our new officers. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Derek.
All right, and on a personal note, thank you all very much for your continued confidence in my leadership of the board. I look forward to another year of productive and collaborative engagement with all of you, so thank you. We move on to unfinished business. There is no unfinished business. We move on to new business. Tom, in light of the hour, why don't we skip the superintendent's report? And instead, how about if you introduce Chip Ward and the report that he will be giving regarding multi-year enrollment projections.
Okay, Chip Ward will come up, and every year Chip presents the enrollment projections for the next few years out. Does incredible work at this, as he does with a lot of things, so I'll turn it over to you, Chip.
Well, good evening, everybody. Normally I just sort of go through with whatever's in the board book, but the times they are changing. And so this is an interesting time, and I'd just like to provide a little bit of historical context on these enrollment projections. You know, we do these once a year. October 1st is our snapshot date, the official snapshot date for the state enrollment, state reporting. And then about a month or so after that, I take that information and try and project out forward for the next anywhere between 6 and 10 years. I do a 10-year projection on the overall district enrollments. I do a 6 to 8 year projection on an individual school basis. And so when we're, you know, this is the time frame to start reporting on that information. But before I talk a little bit about the enrollment projections going forward, I want to take a little bit of time and just talk about sort of what's happened in the past. And this graph here shows the enrollment trend since basically the end of World War II. The blue line is the total enrollment in the school system, which was at a low of, in 1947-48, of around a little under around 5,500 students, and grew rapidly through the 1950s to a peak of around 12,000 students at the end of that decade, and then grew a little bit more slowly to around 13,000 students, and then has dropped fairly precipitously to a low in the early 80s of around 7,000 students. And then we've had this steady gradual trend climbing up from the middle 80s till around the middle of the aught decade, and we peaked at around 10,000 students. And now you can see that the line is turning again. So we're about to enter into a new phase of this. But I just sort of, as you new members of the Board of Ed and old members of the Board of Ed, just sort of look back at what it was like in the 50s when we had somewhere between 600 and 800 new students every year coming into the school district, and what that must have been like to try and manage from an enrollment perspective. Basically 2 elementary schools at a time coming in. And then in the mid 70s, when we were losing 400 to 600 students a year from the district. And that was the time when we closed about 5 or 6 elementary schools. We closed 2 of our middle schools. And then since that time frame, we've had relatively stable enrollment, but gradually increasing trends of around 100 students a year from the mid-80s through the aughts. But things are changing now. We're actually going to be showing a decline. I'm going to show a steady decline out for the next 10 years or so. And what drives that, first of all, is the births. Both in the state of Connecticut and in West Hartford. And so the purple line is the births statewide that peaked in the early 1990s, interestingly enough, at around almost 50,000 births. And for 2012 have shown only around 36,000 births. So you can see a substantial fall off in that birth rate. West Hartford didn't quite follow that trend, and we had births continue to grow through much of the 90s and peaked somewhere almost at 750 students in 2001, and then in 2004 we were up to 730 students. Now these students turned into kindergarten 5 years later, so those are what drove those large increases during the end of the decade. But if you take a look at the most recent data that I've got through 2012, our birth rate has declined to under 600 students, so 580 students is what we saw of births in 2012. So that will have significant impacts going forward. And as you can see here, what I've done is I've plotted the blue line is still that overall total enrollment for the school district, And the green line in this case is the bursts that were 5 years previously. So I've shifted them 5 years. And you can see how closely they match up and how important that birth rate trend is towards the overall enrollment projections. So I mean, I adjusted the scale so that they're pretty much lined up in the early 50s level. The one minor difference is that you see that the blue line is a little bit above the green line, and that's because we tend to have a lot more kids who are educated in our school system than are born in the town. People move to the town for the school systems, and that's been true since the end of the 1970s. So what we do in the enrollment projections, we use what's called the cohort survival ratio, and that's simply the ratio of the number of second graders this year to the number of first graders that we had last year. So typically it's a number of 1.02, which means we had 102 second graders this year, and we had 100 first graders last year. So those 100 first graders turned into 102 second graders. And that just reflects the growth rate of around 2%, the natural growth rate in the district. So I calculate birth to each cohort, birth to grade 1, grade K, K to 1, 1 to 2. So I don't report on all of those, but I just sort of, the detailed report has five or six key of those ones, but I want to focus on the two key ones that I see here. One is that birth to grade K cohort survival ratio. Normally you just do it 1 year to the next, grade 1 to grade 2, grade 2 to grade 3. This one looks at births 5 years ago to incoming kindergartners. Those are the 2 times when I have census information. In other words, we have every birth is recorded in the town clerk's office, and every kindergartner is obviously registered in our school system. We don't have good data on 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, and 4-year-olds. So we look at the birth to grade K cohort survival ratio. And you can see it's varied quite a bit. 1 year in 2003, we had almost 16% more kindergartners than we had births 5 years ago. But more recently, it's stabilized at around 1.04, 1.05, 1.06. So we're around 5% or 6% more kindergartners than we have than we had births 5 years ago. And that really sort of is the key thing that drives our enrollment growth, is that ratio. The other cohort survival ratio I want to talk about is the grade 6 cohort survival ratio. This is the ratio of grade 5 to grade 6. This number, normally all the numbers I've talked about are greater than 1. We have more kids next year than we had this year in the cohort. Grade 6 is the one place where it doesn't happen. This is the place where we transition from elementary to middle school. This is also the point in time where so that's a natural breaking point in the district. That's also the point in time where there are lots of other schools capacity. In other words, these kids have to be educated, so you have to have classrooms available for them. And there are a lot of other classrooms available beginning in 6th grade, not only in parochial schools, not only in private schools, but also in the CREC interdistrict magnets. And so this trend we used to lose around 6 to 7% of our 5th to 6th graders. This past year, we lost almost 11% of our 5th to 6th graders. And I'm still trying to, I don't have all the data yet to be able to answer that question. That's what really the next 2 slides begin to talk about. One is the ratio of private school enrollment to the total enrollment. And so this looks at grade K. There's 2 sets of bars, grade K, grade 1 through 5, grade 6, grade 7 through 8, and grade 9 through 12. The green bar is what it was about 15 years ago, or 17 years ago, sorry, in 1996. And the purple bar is the most current data that I have is 2012. The 2013 data, the October 2013 data for private schools will be available in March, and I'll update it at that point in time. So you can see we've increased our market share, if you will. In other words, the percentage of students attending private school has dropped, most notably in kindergarten. We didn't have full-day K in 1996. We do have full-day K in 2012. The elementary school levels. And there's less of a change in the middle school levels. But overall, you see that currently about 5 to 6% of our K through 5 population is educated in private schools, and around 11 to 12% in the upper grade levels. So you see that shift in that transition. The other competition, if you will, for our students is in other public school districts. These are students who attend pre-K through grade 12, other public school districts. And that's grown dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years. from in 2008, 2009, we had 171 students attending interdistrict magnet schools in 3 main places. CREC operates interdistrict magnet schools, Hartford operates host magnet schools, and Bloomfield operates a pre-K, K magnet school. So those are the 3 primary places where our students go. About half of our students go to CREC interdistrict magnet schools, about 40% to Hartford host magnet schools, and the balance, around 8%, go to the Bloomfield pre-K. Obviously, pre-K is a big chunk of the population. Elementary school is the next biggest chunk. This is the most recent data, and that purple band is the grade 6 students. We had 34 students attending, grade 6 students attending correct or interdistrict magnet students compared to 48 last year. So that's not where they're going yet. So that's why I'm thinking I still haven't quite worked my way around that one, but that's a very interesting statistic. So then when we combine those cohort survival ratios with the birth rate changes, you end up with this chart that I've now extended for out through the next 10 years. And you see basically a relatively straight line. We're dropping around 100 students a year for the next 10 years. And this really will have significant impacts in terms of the long-term capital and space needs in the district. Throughout that upward slope of the curve through the 90s, we reopened elementary schools, we substantially expanded our middle schools, we substantially expanded our high schools, we added a 3rd middle school, we touched almost every elementary school in terms of capital investment. One point, I think I totaled up to around $140 million in what was driven by that increase. And now we're at a different point in time, and this will have different implications. So there isn't large capital needs for new building space, but it will also have implications in terms of our operating budget, and we're having reduced impacts on our operating budget because we're going to have reduced numbers of students. If we take a look at the enrollment projections, this shows it by grade level. That top line is the elementary school students. We peaked at around 4,700 students around 3 years ago in the 2010-2011 school year. And we're dropping steadily to probably around 4,100 students based on the current birth rates, assuming the current birth rates are the correct ones and they average out at that level. So we will have plenty of room available in our elementary school system. The high schools, which is the next line down, our overall enrollment peaked about 3 years ago at 3,100 students, sorry. And it's going to gradually decline over the next couple of years to around 2,600 or 2,700 students by the end of the forecast period. And the middle school, which saw a prolonged enrollment peak period of around 2,200 students to 2,300 students throughout from the 2003 all the way to through 2011-12, is gradually dropping to under 2,000 students and near 1,900 students at the end of the forecast period. So that sort of is a brief snapshot in terms of the overall trends. I did want to highlight, I have in the book detailed projections for each school. I did want to highlight that even though we are okay overall in space at all of our building levels, overall we do have a shortage of space at Bugby School. Bugby School is, based on the detailed projections, I'm showing that it's short 2 classrooms. Relative to the space that's available at that building for the next 3 years. And then gradually the overall enrollment trends. Bugby, when I first started here in '96, was about 280 students, and it was shuffling between being a 2-section per school grade and a 1-section per school grade. And now we're a full 3 to 4 sections per school grade at Bugby. We've pretty much filled out that school. We've already added 5 modular classrooms to that school. We have done as many internal modifications to create classroom spaces. We have one more internal modification that we can do to create 1 space. And then in order to fill up the last space, we are proposing moving the preschool, which is currently at Bugby, to Brayburn for the 2014-2015 school year in order to free up that second classroom space for our projected K-5 enrollments. So that's really what the overall enrollment projections are. The implications for space needs are essentially, we're not going to have any space needs other than this short-term space situation at Bugby School. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chip, as always. The prognosticator. So I see at least two sides of this. One is the reasons for growth, and of course, more importantly, the consequences and implications of this. And of course, in addition to space needs, there's questions of, I mean, there's one question, is there an optimum number of students for our district? I mean, whether or not we can guide that or not. And the question is based also on things like ECS, education cost sharing. How does that impact us, the kind of money we receive? On the one hand, we pay less because we have fewer students and less space needs, but then how does that put us in position vis-a-vis the state? And driving that question is, again, what should our level of anxiety be about losing students to private school or to CREC or other things? Is that a cause for alarm? Is it an indication of what? Because otherwise it's interesting numbers and wonderful historical trends, but what actions do we need to take following that? We obviously need to talk about Rayburn, pre-K, Bugby, all these sorts of things. A couple of things in the report that you didn't mention that I want to hear more about is this a rather large discrepancy moving forward between Sedgwick and KP, Conard and Hall, and kind of in reverse of 200 student difference, and how does that? I'm curious to hear your take on that. Of course, in the long view, historically there's parity and it goes up and down, and do we just kind of let history absorb this and then eventually it'll get back to parity? I'll leave it at that, and I have other questions after that.
Yeah, with respect to optimum size, I mean, that's really, we are the tail on that dog. We're sort of riding those larger demographic trends. I mean, the overall state birth rate has been dropping since 1990. I mean, we're finally sort of beginning to see the things of that. We fought that for a very long time. I mean, the birth rate has dropped 28% statewide, and it's still flat for the district. So I think we've done very, very well on that perspective. Optimum size of district, that's an interesting question. You always tend to feel comfortable with where you are, type of thing. But I mean, I've always felt that, when I look at other school districts, most of the school districts, the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile of school districts in the state is 1,000 to 4,000 students. So, 75% of the school districts in the state are 4,000 students or less. Those are generally pretty small districts. This district size allows the superintendent to really both keep in touch with all of the schools, but yet have enough capacity in terms of financial capacity to be able to really do some pretty creative and innovative types of things. If you're a smaller district, all you're just doing is you're just fighting fires. If you're a larger district, you really begin to lose touch with the individual schools. I mean, there's 60 schools or so in Hartford. It's very challenging to keep that. So, this is what I'm used to, so I don't, but it feels a lot like Goldilocks, just about right.
But that's an argument for maintaining more or less this current size around the projections bear out.
Right, and I don't see, we're going to be a 16 school district as long as I can tell. When we were closing districts was when we were losing schools, it was when we were losing 400 to 600 students a year. We're not anywhere near that. And even at the out peaks, we're still at 4,100 students. The last time we were at 4,100 students, we still had 11 elementary schools. I see no long-term implications from that perspective at all. Where the sixth graders went, I don't know. I'm still chasing that one down. I'll get back to you on that one. That's just interesting to me. That's just and it was equal between KP and Sedgwick. There was no difference.
What's the percentage overall of students not attending West Hartford Public Schools versus those?
Around 11%.
11%
Yeah.
Currently.
Currently.
Okay.
Currently. Sedgwick and KP, both of those are excellent sizes to be able to run middle schools at. The teaming will change a little bit, but both of them are fine. I mean, they're not going to have any major issues there. And Conard, even in the out years at 1,250 students, is still a large high school which offers a wide range of course offerings. It's, when you get to high school sizes of 600 and 400 that you really sort of worry. So yeah, it'll be a little bit smaller, but that sort of frees up some of the fiscal pressures that we felt when we were doing all those growth years, when you're just trying to, oh my gosh, we got to add 8 teachers here and 4 teachers there and all those types of things. It will provide us some flexibility and breathing room.
And funding from the state?
Oh, funding from the state. Yes, if we have fewer kids, we'll quote unquote, get less funding from the state, but given the state owes us $57 million a year and gives us 16, it's not a difference that we're ever going to see.
Chip, the 11% that you lost, that we
Yeah.
lost, and you're trying to wrap your arms around it, what percentage of that, and what have we had for trends for the last 10 years, and do you project any of that? Yeah, can you go back to that?
So that's been our trend. It's varied anywhere, and I've got it farther back. We've had other years as low as 0.9 in the 1990s range. It averages, I'd say, around 0.92 to 0.93 is what our long-term average of the cohort survival ratio is over the 20 years or so that I've been tracking it. So 0.92. So we lost 8%.
8%.
And we're at 0.89 for this specific year, which is 11%. And I always use the 3-year average for my projection purposes, which is a 0.91. So projecting, losing 9%.
Okay, so going further, and when you finally wrap your arms around that, you'll report to us and figure, hey.
Yep. Right. I'll get the private
Eureka,
school
I
enrollments
found it.
and figure that out. And the other thing is it could just be one of those random noise things, and it'll come back next year. So.
But just to be clear, this chart here is not strictly a function of private school. That could be people moving out of town or people going to other public districts, or is it your suspicion that it's driven largely or almost entirely by private schools?
Based on my historical, every other grade level is a 1 point, is birth to grade K is a 1.06 average. The average from grades, for K to 1 all the way up through 4 to 5 is a 1.01, 1.02 average. Grade 7 and 8 is a 1.01 average. Grade 9 tends to be a 1.04 to 1.05 average because kids who left in 6th grade come back for our high schools. And then grade 10, this is the one that stands out, and it stands out because that's that transition period from elementary school to middle school, and that's also when there is capacity. So I don't think it's if it's a fluke, yes, then it could be a fluke of students moving out. So we'll have to take a look and see what it comes back up to next year.
Is there a financial driver to this, given the slow uptick in the economy? I mean, typically you would imagine people going less often to private school when the economy goes down.
Yeah, you would think that, and then you take a look at 2006, and that was like the boom year, and we had the lowest, the lowest fall off. It's just fascinating to try and figure this thing out. I just really get intrigued by this one.
Well, I'll be interested to hear what your conclusions are. I think that this really opens up an opportunity. Ellen was a real champion of trying to dig in and make sure that the middle school experience was just as strong as the elementary and the high school experiences. So as we learn more, if we do indeed find out that there was a crisis of confidence in the ability of these schools to provide a sound education, I think that's something that we need to take very seriously and dig in and make sure we correct that. Do we have any sense, Chip, of any of these people coming back for 9th grade?
Yes.
We do?
Yes.
Was that?
It's 1.04 or so, something like that. It's the typical number.
So we know that people just after 5th grade they duck out for 3 years, and we know that those kids come back to Conator Hall.
No, we don't know that those kids come back to Conator Hall. All we know is that there's the transition from 5th to 6th grade, which is a natural breaking point.
Right.
And there's a transition from 8th to 9th grade. And we have fewer 6th graders and 5th graders, and we have more 9th graders and 8th graders.
Yeah, because it would be interesting to see if we're trying to figure out why people are leaving the West Hartford public school system after 5th grade. It'd be interesting to find out why we're seeing that uptick in 9th grade. I mean, I think we can all, draw some reasonable conclusions as to why, but I think it would be interesting to dig in and find out, if those kids are in fact coming back. So just my own 2 cents. So, okay.
Chip, you talked about the birth rate in Connecticut, and that's how you're tracking. West Hartford schools are also tied, and we often hear it to real estate, and real estate's tied to West Hartford schools, and it moves that way. What about the turnover in town with the real estate, and where does that number come in? I know that just, you always kind of go back to your own, in my neighborhood, I know there's been a turnover and younger kids have moved in, and I've seen that. How big of an impact is that?
Well, that's this chart here on the birth to grade K cohort survival ratio. We typically get, say, approximately 650 births in Connecticut, in West Hartford. By the time those kids come to kindergarten, they're close to 700 students.
What's the difference?
About 1.06. 1.06, about a 6% increase. And so and then we gain about 1% to 2% a year every year going through the elementary school level, as that's just the nature of the cohort survival. So that's where that turnover, I don't have an adjustment for the actual turnover. If I could try and predict that, I'd have some nice hedge fund investments going. But this just takes a look at the overall average of the impact of everything that happens, which is, people, moving to town, the overall economic factors in terms of, are there jobs, in other words, people only move to town if there are jobs, here, so it takes into account that. Takes into account the turnover as folks without children leave West Hartford and are replaced by folks with children, and that's generally been the case. I mean, we generally have more kids in the school system than were born here.
All right, we have a time constraint. By charter, the council has to start its meeting by 7:30. So if there are additional questions regarding this topic, we can cycle you back onto the next agenda, Chip. In the meantime, thank you. And we'll look forward to so you are suggesting that you are going to formally make that proposal about the Bugby to Brayburn shift at some other time. That's not a formal proposal.
That's not
tonight,
a proposal at this point in time, but I mean, we're going to be talking about that, administratively, about how we're going to manage that proposal, and we'll be reporting to you.
Right. Okay, great. And yeah, so we'll look forward to hearing your perspective and insights regarding what's going on 5th to 6th grade.
Yep.
And based on what you say, maybe we dig a little deeper.
Yep.
Right.
Cool.
Okay, great. All right, thanks. Approval of the minutes. We're going to move quickly to approval of the minutes. All in favor of is there a recommendation that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of November 6th, 2013?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion, Terry? Or anybody else? Does anyone else want to offer anything on the minutes? Okay, all in favor, you guys abstain, of approving the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting of November 6th, 2013, please say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, very good. 2 abstentions. Motion carries. Is there are there any reports from other boards or organizations? Are there reports from our student representatives?
Try and make this quick. Here we go. Second quarter is in full swing. The fall sports are also coming to the end. This Friday is the Hall-Connor football game. And then later on we have playoffs with different sports. Later this week, the music department is having their annual Madrigals performance. I believe it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yesterday, a few of the acting classes had a in-school project called Historical Character Day, which I find interesting, where those certain students are in character from the time they wake up till 2:15 that day. It's very interesting. They cannot break character. It's very interesting. I'm going through the hallway seeing Amy Winehouse and Andy Warhol, and they don't break character. You can ask them questions. They're carrying around a map of the school. They don't know where they're going. Interesting thing was we had a fire drill too, so I want to know how they reacted to that. And also for the game this Friday, it's one of the selections for NBC's Game of the Week. So I encourage you to go online tonight to NBC Connecticut and vote for that game.
Well, as Jordan said, we're having the football game. Player introductions start at 6. The actual game starts at 6:30. It's at Conard. I encourage you guys all to come. And this week last week, we had veterans come in for Veterans Day. The foods class cooked them food, and they also did presentations, and they're interviewed for many different classes. Both the students and the veterans enjoyed having this opportunity. Then this Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, we're having the 10-minute play festival. That's about it.
Thanks. Any questions? All right, future business announcement and meeting dates. Next meeting is Tuesday, December 3rd, here at 7 o'clock. I will be out of state. Mark will be pressed into action right away. After that, December 17th. Are there any requests for future agenda items? No. Are there comments from visitors? Is there anybody who would like to address the board? We do not have an executive session. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? There's a second from Mark. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Abstentions? We are adjourned, and welcome new board members. Thanks.
Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Welcome our special friends and guests who are here tonight. And we'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could ask my colleagues just to remain standing for a minute. I learned a very short time ago that the wife of Dana Hallenbeck, Bunny Hallenbeck, passed away in the last couple of days, and Dana was our Director of Public Works, an incredibly well-respected guy here in the town for many, many years, just retired a few years ago and became a minister. And Bunny is a very young woman, a wonderful woman, and none of us has really had the chance to see Dana or express our condolences in person yet, since we're just finding out, but we did want to know, him to know and his whole family to know that we're thinking of them tonight, and that Bunny is in our thoughts and prayers as we begin the meeting this evening. So if we could just please observe a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Okay, we have the roll call, please, Ms. LeBreau.
Mr. Adler for the last time.
I was just going to say that. Thank you. Here.
Ms. Cantor? Here. Mr. Captain?
Here.
Ms. Casperson?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Mr. Dorr is absent. Mrs. Hall?
Here.
Ms. Kindle?
Here.
And Mr. Slifka?
Here. Okay, thank you, Ms. LeBreau. We are here, it doesn't quite say it on our agenda, but you have to read into it a bit, but we are here for the every 2-year meeting where the old council meets for the last time, and then we swear in the members of the new council. But as we embark on that, the first thing we do, which does not appear on the agenda, but we have done by tradition, is that we say goodbye to anyone who is departing. And Steve Adler picked a good time to go because he gets the night all to himself. Sometimes we have 3 or 4 people go at once, and we all have to limit our remarks, things. But Steve, the night will all be yours in that sense. I do want to just point out a housekeeping matter for a moment, or explanation. Mr. Dorr, as happens to me, happens to many members of the council, since we're all volunteers, he is stuck out of town on business and can't be here. I was tempted to kid with him that he actually could not take office if he wasn't here in person tonight. But I was reminded quickly by the town clerk that the one precedent for what's happened with Mr. Dorr tonight is myself, because my first time I was elected to the council, I was actually on my honeymoon. And we had to do the same thing for Burke that we did for me back then. So he sent us a note earlier, and he was actually going to try to call in, and he unfortunately couldn't do that. But no, he is certainly here in spirit. So with that, we move back to Steve. So I'm going to go first. And
try if you can just say something nice.
I'm going to try. I'm going to really, really try. Steve joined us in 2007, and I knew Steve far longer than that because I worked with his wife, Darlene, at Updike, Kelly, and Spellacy for many years before I was on the council, and certainly before Steve was. And well, I had a different introduction to this, but then he introduced me to his neighbor just before the meeting, and realized that he's trying to change history, rewrite history as he goes out the door here. That when I first met Steve, I remember the moment I ran into the Adlers at the Subway restaurant on Farmington Avenue, and one of the first things out of Steve's mouth was that he was interested in running for the council someday. And tonight he told me that actually the real story is that some 6 years later or so after that encounter, that a group of neighbors rallied around and invited Steve into the house to try to recruit him for the council. So I don't know which part's true, and I'm sure you'll correct it.
But I was told it was a paid position.
Okay. Very good.
But I went 6 years.
Now we get to the bottom of it. Steve also has a slight historic distinction. Now, all council history is relative because it is about as good as our records or the memories of those who have been around for a while are, but I run these things by our town clerk as much as we can to confirm them, and I believe, Steve, is only the second person to serve on the council as an independent. We had Barbara Carpenter a few years ago, and we've had Steve for about the last year or so. That also makes him the longest tenured non-Democrat who is on the council as he goes.
Wow.
Yes, history book, Steve. You didn't know I had this all prepared for you.
You know, Ray O'Toole's so jazzed up right now. She's so jazzed up.
So
you're not flipping me, Ray.
So what I will remember most of Steve first is that he's a great husband, from what Darlene says. You know, we know he's got a fantastic wife and a very understanding one. And I knew her independently, so I can confirm that for sure. But by all respects, he is a loving and wonderful husband and a fantastic dad with a great son, who has gone on to great things since leaving Hall High. His picture's here. Oh,
China?
Wow.
It's a little outdated.
Yes, yeah. Rewriting history. Just point out, he is slightly older than this now, but he was adorable then, for sure.
Say, look at that head of hair.
So this is going about as I had thought it might. This is good. So now, Steve and I didn't always agree, and I'm not sure, but I can't figure out where we disagreed. But notwithstanding that, my memories as Steve leaves the council are all happy ones. I will remember Steve as just a good guy who wanted to be here to make a contribution to his town. And he's making these faces. It's being harder and harder for me to stay on my script. But you're seeing, I actually put this down here, you're seeing evidence that Steve, he can laugh at himself, and he never took himself too seriously or this position too seriously. So in that spirit, there are a couple things I want to point out as Steve goes. One is Steve's, I think I and others will always remember Steve's incredible use of acronyms, like none of us has ever seen. Our favorite one is the part of our budget, those are family members of those who are new. You're going to learn these things quickly and wish you never had. But an important part of our budget is the capital improvement plan, which you don't want to say that all the time, so it's called the CIP. Except under Adler language, which is, it's the SIP. And we don't know where that started, but it's been there forever, and I think we'll retire it with Steve tonight, but we will...
We'll call it the KIP.
We'll remember it very fondly. Then, as long as it's in reruns, to see the real Steve, not the... Well, you see some of the real Steve here at the table all the time, but to see the real Steve, while it is still in rotation, you need to watch WHC-TV. About a couple weeks ago, Steve was the guest on some show called Two Guys and a Lot of Wine, which I had never heard of, but someone who will remain nameless sent me a text, said, "You got to see this. Steve's on TV on this show. It's incredible." And it was, right? And this is not one of those things where everybody locally just gets into it. This is truly humorous. So Two Guys and a Lot of Wine, Steve and I have talked about it a couple of times. I don't think he'll have a more memorable television appearance than this. In fact, we probably should have gotten copies and distributed it to everybody tonight. We'll have to do that.
And I just want to point out, I was the only one in my terms that was the only one that supported the open container law. The rest of these folks are, particularly these folks, are shutting down your happiness. So I may run another term, if you don't mind. So.
And I think that appearance was a thank you for your position. I am going to particularly miss, well, Steve and I had a segment of the meeting, every council meeting, that was kind of like this. And what I like is that we did it no matter how the meeting had gone. If it had been boring, if it had been contentious, if it had just been quick and happy, we always, basically at the end of the meeting, we do this calendar, upcoming events thing. And I read the calendar, and then I immediately turn to Steve and say, "Is there anything I missed, Steve?" And almost every time, Steve had 2 or 3 things that had somehow escaped my list, and he would quickly update them. But I always thought it was kind of a nice, humorous exchange at the end of the meeting, kind of bring us back to reality. One thing Steve did take seriously, and it wasn't easy to do, was his duties on the Administration Technology Committee. Those who've been on the council, those who serve on it now, know it is sometimes like watching paint dry in terms of its level of excitement, but it is very important, and Steve took it really, really seriously. brought his professional expertise to it, and that's appreciated, because when people do that, it makes the rest of us step up and take that work even more seriously. As Steve is going, I recall that some years ago, I had the privilege of attending an event that was a de facto reunion of a group of people who had served on the council together in the early 1970s. And what I was struck by was that they dealt with some very contentious issues during those times, and they left having been very fond of each other and very proud of the work that they had done together. And they were all very happy to see each other despite the passage of many years. And I certainly know that I'll see Steve around town and expect to see him, but I know that someday when we have a get-together like that, that I'm going to remember Steve the same way. And I know we ran into, coincidentally, he and I and Darlene and my wife ran into each other the other night and at a restaurant in the center, and Steve mentioned that he's starting to feel the void. Like, what's it going to be like after this night? You know, he's been involved in town for so long, and what will come next? And I know I can't answer that question. None of us really can, but I know that his colleagues will remember him fondly, and that he will always have a place to help us.
Most of them will remember.
Some former colleagues, I don't know,
fondly.
might feel
most,
differently.
most of you folks.
So with that, Steve, I want to say thank you. We'll give you the parting gift in a moment, but we're going to miss you. So thanks very much, and thank you, Darlene. Okay, and Mrs. Hall.
Yeah, it is kind of amazing how so many of the things that I was reflecting on, the mayor caught those same feelings. Yeah. But no, one of the things I've always enjoyed about working with Steve is his sense of humor, and you know, the topics that we do discuss on the council and council meetings can be pretty dry, but Steve would always find some humor in whatever topic we were discussing. He could share a joke. He'd always make sure the meeting would end on a high note. And often the jokes were at his own expense. So he's you know, I'm going to miss that about our meetings. His background in information technology brought an area of expertise to the council that we don't have with any of us, and that will be sorely missed. Half the time I could not understand what he was saying, but I know his contributions on the Admin and Technology Committee benefited the town and helped us to improve efficiencies. He's also a very caring person. I think he is able to relate really well to people from all walks of life. I think you really enjoyed being on the Public Safety Committee and getting to know the different police officers, especially on your ride along. That it's a very interesting aspect of our job when we cover the Public Safety Committee, getting to know what a day in the life or a shift in the life of a police officer or a firefighter is. And Steve, I think maybe your next career is going to be as a police officer. But I think you're going to miss that part of the job a lot. He was also always very focused on business and business development in West Hartford. You know, what can we do to make West Hartford more business friendly? What can we do to develop the areas of New Park Ave where industries have changed and gone out? So we'd have lots of great discussions on business development with Rob Ralston, and you know, I'm going to miss those discussions. But most of all, you know, I want to thank Steve for your public service. People are amazed to learn that this is a volunteer position, and it takes someone who is really dedicated to their community to put in the kind of time that Steve has done on the council. So I know Darlene and Josh missed him for all of those nights that he was away, and they're going to be happy to have him back. But on behalf of Burke and I know Burke is sad that he's not here to be able to share those thoughts himself, but thank you for your service, Steve.
Mrs. Cantor.
Thank you. A lot of what I had also thought about written down has been said, but I do want to say, you really do put a smile on our face. The minute we walk in the door, you're always like, hey, how are the kids? How's your Josh? You know, how's your Josh? And you are a terrific family man. Your dedication is so clear, and your pride is remarkable. I know that, I hope Josh gets an opportunity to watch this, because I don't think there's a prouder dad out there. And I treasure humor. My husband thinks he's funnier maybe than he is, but no, no. Humor is really important, and it keeps our lives. I'm teasing. No, he's really, really funny.
Point of order, Deputy Mayor.
I know.
Attorney Cantor, would you like to come to the podium? I think on the back end, you gave me your business card when we saw each other. On the other side of Michael's business card is actually a subpoena. So
Okay.
I think, okay.
Back on.
Back to you. I apologize.
No, I didn't mean it in a bad way. I meant that you immediately connected with my husband. I could see that humor and that light that you both have. When you look at life, and there's a good spot in everything. There's a bright, bright spot, and that optimism and that perspective is contagious, and we've all benefited from it. And I know your family has, and we all have at the table, and I want to thank you for that, because again, it's not always a fun job sometimes when we don't agree, and you do get to the really do away with all the tension by a funny joke, and again, often at your own expense, which is really sometimes a remarkable trait to have. I also want to thank you for being a great neighbor as I run through your yard. I do, it's on my run, and I oftentimes run through, and it keeps his yard very clean.
Just to be clear, I don't live in her neighborhood. She runs through my neighborhood. I don't live in her neighborhood. I'd like to live in her neighborhood, but I don't live in her neighborhood.
For 18 years, we were neighbors, but that's okay. Anyway, I just want to thank you for your contribution to the council, your humor, your commitment to the town, your enthusiasm, and I know that you are going to remind us of things that you want done, and you're going to have input to all of us, and you always have our ear. Again, thank you so much for all you do, and thank you to Darlene and Josh for letting us have him. So.
Would you like to say a few words? I mean, you have spoken several times already. But oh, I'm sorry. Who else? Please go ahead, Mrs. Kendall.
We'll be short, because, I mean, a lot has been said, but through you, Mr. Mayor. Just chat, keep chatting. At any rate, Steve, it's been a pleasure serving with you for the past 2 years, and we've bumped into each other, as we've both been running for, since 2007, I for the board at the time, and you for the council. And I take great exception. It's not like watching paint dry, being on the Administration and Technology Committee. And I understand what he's saying when he's talking that technology stuff. So we will miss your expertise on A&T. And I think that a lot of very exciting things, and part of what you can count as your accomplishments, are some of the really remarkable technology changes that have happened in this town over the past, since you've been on. I mean, when I was on the board and you were on the council, running Google Earth crashed at KP, crashed half of the school system. Their computer system entirely. And I think we are a lot further along than that now. And I think no small part due to your advocacy and your understanding and your passion for getting us out of the 18th century into the 19th to the 20th, and now here we are, in the next century. And so I think you take a lot of credit for that. And Steve, I've always respected you're an independent thinker, and you've always wanted to do the right thing, and that has been regardless of political affiliation. And I think that is something you can take with you and be very proud of. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll conclude my comments, and we wish you the best, and you and Darlene and Josh, and we hope that all goes well into the next adventure.
Mr. Captain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My colleagues have really run the gamut, so I'm running out of things to add to what they said. One thing about Steve that's always impressed me, and Darlene, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've noticed this. Every time he mentions you, it's my beautiful wife, Darlene, and it's my wonderful son, Josh. And it's without exception, when he mentions you, he puts superlatives in front of your name and in front of your son's name, and it's really wonderful and kind to see. And with that, the other great aspect of Mr. Adler is he usually has an announcement to add in after we're through our 50 million announcements of the evening. And I'm wondering if you have one tonight, Mr. Adler.
Yes, we're all going over to Sherry's home to witness their 5th child. No, I'm joking. I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Thank you, Mr. Captain. Mrs. Casperson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Adler, I would say that one of the things that impressed me when I first came on the council was we were both in new jobs and having a time of really commiserating on new challenges of both those and the council, and having coffee and talking about those things. It was a great time to be able to work together and to learn from each other, and that there wasn't so much distance but from this side of the aisle to the other. And I think that understanding how you feel about your family, which he always speaks very highly of, and your sense of justice has been something that we always connected on. So I would think, but after 21 years with my husband in the military, it's really good that you weren't sitting on the side of the aisle, because with all the acronyms, you might have been jabbed a time or two. So that's good. But it was always entertaining to hear, and it's good to have a giggle here in all the things that we do. So I do wish you well, and hope that you will continue on a very positive journey and enjoying the family and the time with them that you treasure so much.
And Mr. Davidoff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Adler. And I've served with Steve probably the longest. When we add up our service on the TPZ and the town council, we both served there before our election in 2007 to the council. And we sat on a number of dog zoning applications for the maximum of dogs and other things. And we basically usually agreed on the outcomes as reasoned them out and came to conclusions. And I remember it was the summer of 2007, and Steve calls me up and he says, would you be interested in seeking a seat on the town council? And I said, I think you're crazy. I really enjoy serving on the zoning board. I really have no interest in serving on the town council. And he says, no, really, I'm going to run, and we're looking for another person to run and a few more people. And I said, well, why don't you tell me who else is running, and I'll get back to you. The phone rang almost every single night, and my kids go, who is that? I go, it's Mr. Adler. Okay, and I think I told Steve, I think it was the day of the convention, that, okay, fine, I'll run, okay, but don't expect too much, but we'll see what happens. And come election night, we were elected to the town council in 2007. And Steve got more votes than I did that evening, and he said because I had served previously on the Newington Town Council that I should assume the role of minority leader. And that was a very nice gesture, and it was a nice honor, and it spoke a lot to Steve's character, that thought I would be able to lead the team and just be here and do a good job. And I'll never forget that. And we've had a lot of memorable occasions in the campaigning. We've gone door to door with everyone sitting around this table here tonight. Okay, so that's something I have, and you are all different types of campaigners, let me tell you, okay? Steve enjoys the grocery stores, okay, and shaking the hands in front of the grocery stores, and that's just fine too. But seriously, Steve, I think Scott mentioned the SIP, and one of the phrases used to say a lot was, it's always baked into the SIP, right? And my view, 10,000 feet above the surface here, and you would come up with all these insurance-type lingos, and I go home and I say to Lexi, do you speak like this at work? Because if you do, I really don't think I'd understand what goes on there. And she goes, nah, you don't work in corporate America, you really wouldn't understand that. So, but through the process, Steve, I've met your beautiful wife and your wonderful son. And we were visiting Bentley last spring, and we ran into Josh on campus, and he's quite a gentleman, and he was quite pleasant and quite welcoming to us when we were on campus. The thing that Steve would always tease me about would be, you seem to talk a lot about some things when you feel really passionate, and you know, I just want to go home, so can you please be quiet? So I think like 2 meetings later, I decided not to say anything, and I noticed the minutes from that meeting, 14 pages of the 16 pages of minutes were just Mr. Adler's comments. So, but no, really, Steve, public service is a valued aspect of one's life. It takes a lot of time away from your family, and it takes a lot of dedication. And it's just one aspect of who Steve Adler is. I don't know if many people know this, but the Adlers on Thanksgiving Day, and I think maybe on Christmas Day as well, volunteer for the Salvation Army, and they go out and they deliver meals to people who are homebound. And I give them a lot of credit. And they're also very involved with My Sister's Place and raise funds for those with domestic violence issues. So that speaks to somebody who's more involved just in local government. Steve's also a ham radio operator. He's very much interested in jazz music. He does not have cable television in his home, so he won't be able to watch this on rerun on the TV, but he'll watch it on his computer, and he does. And with that said, Steve, it really has been a pleasure to serve with you. It's good to be sitting over here. I get a really good view of your facial expression, and I wish you just the best in your retirement from the council. And as is said on Friday afternoons to members of the Jewish faith, good Shabbos.
All right, Steve, I think it's finally your turn.
I guess it's my turn. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm one for very few words, so I've whittled this. I've whittled this down a little bit. Actually, Darlene said to me, you've been talking for 6 years, so just keep this really short. So that's what she said to me. But and all kidding aside, this has been probably one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. To be able to work with the council, help the community, and help folks that need help with street level issues. So just in a brief summary, as far as Claire, I really enjoyed A&T, and I enjoyed, and some nights when I didn't want to get to the meeting, she'd say, we're going to be talking about technology tonight. You're going to be coming along. And that would always get me to the meetings, So I want to thank you for the great experience there. Before I begin over the next 90 minutes, you guys don't have anywhere to go, right? Okay. I just want to congratulate Chris Barnes for coming on the council. I think he is going to be a great replacement for me. He'll be doing a much better job. And he brings a well-balanced approach. He's a father of 3 girls. His beautiful wife, Stephanie, is right next to him. That is your wife, right? Okay. And you guys will get along very, very well. And how about a round of applause for Chris? Okay, so let's get on to the thank yous. And you're right, I don't get cable, so being as cheap as I am. I want to start out by thanking, and my wife helped me write some of these notes. She actually wrote the beginning part of this. I want to thank my beautiful wife, Darlene, She wrote that, actually. No, she didn't. And our son Josh and I passed around a picture of him there. And feel free to circulate that in the audience if you can pass that along. For all their help. Running for in a campaign, in running, and you folks know you wouldn't be here without your spouses and the hard work and support they provide. And Chris, you can certainly recognize that. The door-to-doors, getting to know people, but it's the support at home that you get. And it's so vital that you're all in lockstep and having support of one another. So, I really want to thank my campaign manager who got me out there, and Josh as well. And I think he is watching. If he's not, he should be studying, but hopefully he's watching. In the hard work you've done. So thank you, sweetie. And how about a round of applause for Noah? So I'd also like to thank Martha Abondo, my girlfriend. No, my neighbor and her husband, Dr. Abondo. And Martha is, for all of you folks that have frustration with me through the 6 years, it's really her fault. She was the one that invited me into her home back in late 06, 07, I think it was, and we had a living room gathering of neighbors to have a discussion as to if I should run, and more importantly, what am I going to do for the community? And this was, you think some of the questioning on the council was tough. My neighbors and Martha, it was an experience. It was really, politics at its grassroots level. So I want to thank you for you and Dr. Abondo for everything you've done. So thank you very much. Next, I want to thank, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, there's a few thank yous here. So I want to thank the people of West Hartford for really having the trust and the support they gave me over the last 3 terms of 6 years. And, the door knocking, getting to know people, having to explain yourself. You've all been in a supermarket where somebody stops you and says, well, what did you vote like that for? Or why did you take that position? And I really think, being out there, as a town councilman, I really want to thank the public for really having a lot of trust in me, and hopefully I delivered on that. So regardless of your party affiliation, it's about the quality and it's about the caring that you deliver with the people of West Hartford. So I do want to thank the people of West Hartford. Okay, we're moving on. Next thank yous. I want to thank Ron Van Winkle. I am so glad I was the lowest vote getter on the Republican side, because it gives me a chance to sit closest to Ron, where he would lean over to me and go, God, 3 more years and I'm out of here. So, no, I'm joking. I'm joking. But so there'll be, is the Hartford Current? Okay, don't do that, okay? But I want to thank Ron. I want to thank Ron and Dr. List for their leadership. And certainly, regardless of the issues that we have here at the council, when you think of, the storms that we had, Irene and Alfred, and how we came together in those moments of stress and distress, it really says a lot about this council, and as well as the leadership in administration and employees of this town. So I want to thank you, Ron, for being the town manager that you are. There's another thank you, and then we'll speed this up a little bit so you can go home. So I want to thank the town council. I want to thank you guys. We've had our moments, no question, and it's really been a pleasure to serve with each of you, all of you. And also particularly want to say thank you to Scott Slifka and Minority Leader Hall for the amount of time and dedication they have in this job. I mean, I don't think people have a full appreciation as to what they do in their job and the amount of effort they put in and the amount of collaboration they have between them. So I want to thank you for that. And Scott, I think, one of the key things why Scott gets reelected as mayor over and over again, it's his hair. So when I came on the council, I don't know if you know this or not, but when I came on the council, I was scouring over that budget. There is a line item in the budget to maintain his hair. It's like $30,000. So Pat O'Leary, I can hear the FOIAs already. Okay, we're going to have FOIAs on this, for another couple of weeks. I was going to leak this to the West Hartford Patch, but they didn't want anything to do with it. So I'm joking. Scott, you're a great mayor, and we're very blessed to have you. So thank you. And of course, S.C. LeBreau. SC, again, regardless of party, you are the best town clerk in the state of Connecticut. You really are. You have done incredible things in terms of automating that office, managing costs, serving. We are a delivery service to the town of West Hartford, helping people, automating the online GIS system, and the list goes on and on and on. So besides your Oscar nomination performance in Les Mis, which, by the way, was pretty funny, you're doing a great job, and we're very proud to have you, or I'm very proud to know you. Okay, moving on. How am I doing on time? We good? Okay. All right, great. All right. So overall, so the ask is, being that we're in the Thanksgiving frame of mind, the ask is a few things. Darlene and I take the bus to work every single day into Hartford. And the street that I call the Great Divide is Prospect Avenue. And I think as a town, because we lead, the state of Connecticut with the best services, the smartest people, in the best culture, we have an obligation, a social obligation, to help people who need a helping hand. And I think once we're on that bus and we cross over Prospect, less than a mile down the street here, the world is very different. And we have an obligation to help those people. So we need to keep that in mind. So the ask is to each of you to help those people who need some help. And we're the model town to help those folks. So I want to mention that. The other thing too is the other ask, not to lower my well, that could be an ask to lower my taxes, is we need to have more diversity on this council. And I think we've started to do some of that, but we have over 60 languages and cultures in this town, and we need to have more representation of people that this council also reflects. I'm not saying that we're not getting there or we're not doing a good job. It's just, it would be great to see more of that diversity of different cultures within the town, and I think that's very, very important, very important. So that's the two asks. The one ask I have as the general public is to get involved. I'm not a smart guy. It doesn't take really any real genius level to run for council. I happened to do it because I had a passion to help people in the community and to make a contribution. Those folks that are watching, both of you that are watching on TV right now, reach out to the folks on the council. There are board positions, there are commission positions, there are things you can do, and your participation is very important. So, you really hopefully get off the couch and really get involved, because there's a lot of things that you could be doing to make this town a better place. Believe it or not, I'm wrapping up. Okay, we're blessed to live here in West Hartford. We have exceptional services. We are extremely proud of our school systems. Tom Moore, just had a brief conversation with him. Thank goodness we made a decision to appoint him superintendent of schools, because he is going to take our school system into a very positive place. We have top-tier leadership. We have employees that are extremely dedicated, and we have communities that are watching us. So what I'm saying is, you all made comments about my humor. The work we do here is really serious stuff, but don't take yourself too serious. And I leave you with that. Life's pretty short. So with that, that is about it. And I do want to thank everybody. Thank you once again for being here tonight.
Well, Steve, following council tradition, since we don't get a pension, we did deduct this year from the line item for my hair to purchase this for you. This is the traditional council parting gift.
I thought I was getting a dinette set.
That's,
That's the 10-year gift.
So it's, of course, the chair with the town seal, and on the back it says Stephen I. Adler, West Hartford Town Council, November 20th, 2007 to November 19th, 2013. Steve, congratulations and thank you.
It spelled out his whole name? It didn't have initials?
No, we did not abbreviate.
Saya?
Yes. It does say in quotes through you, Mr. Mayor. Okay. Well, with that, we're just going to take a very brief recess, and then we will welcome up Chris Barnes as we let Steve walk off, and we'll get to the rest of the agenda. Thank you.
red light.
Okay, we're back, and we need to move on to number 4, which is the certification of counselors in town election November 5th, 2013, and presentation of certificates to each counselor. And that is we move to accept that, correct? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion to accept the certification of election of counselors in town election November 5th, 2013, and then everyone will be presented with these certificates.
Second.
All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. So for that and number 5, which is the oath of office, we'd like to turn things over to the town clerk, S.E. LeBreau.
I, S.E.S. LeBreau, Town Clerk of the Town of West Hartford, hereby certify that the following persons were elected to the Town Council for a term from November 19th, 2013 to November 17th, 2015. They are Chris Barnes, Sherry Cantor, Harry J. Captain, Judy Casperson, Leon S. Davidoff, Burke Dorr, Denise Berard Hall, Claire Kindle, and Scott Slifka. I further testify that the results of the town election were canvassed and attested to by town moderator Alan Hoffman, and the results have been recorded in the electors' meeting book for the town of West Hartford. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau.
Like to stand up if you want to. Do you want to come to the center? Or do you want to stay in? Okay. Okay. And raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly swear that you will faithfully perform your duties as a member of the West Hartford Town Council according to law and to the best of your abilities, so help you God? I do. Congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. LeBreau, and congratulations to all my colleagues. Special welcome and congratulations to Chris Barnes joining us for the first time here. His wife Stephanie and 2 of his daughters are here this evening. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. That's your first test.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Well done. Thank you. Okay. Very good. All right. We did not give him an instruction manual, so give him a break, please.
Just a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly. I used that before. Okay, so we move on the agenda. We move to number 6, which is call for nomination of president. Are there any nominations?
I happen to have one. I am honored and privileged to nominate Scott Slifka for president of West Hartford Town Council. Scott truly respects and treasures the faith and the trust that the people have left with him over the last 12 years. Scott is intelligent. He is hardworking and he is honest. And I don't know how you can, have a person with those qualities that can mess up, because you just have to do. He is truly cares more than anyone that I know. Scott was the youngest mayor in 2004. He was elected at the age of 30, 10 days before his wedding. And as he mentioned before, he was not here for the swearing-in ceremony because he was on his honeymoon. And that shows just how hard that family, council commitment, and obviously jobs and everything else we have in our lives is. But nobody ever understands when they meet Scott that he is juggling so much, and that's truly remarkable. In 2012, though, he became the longest-serving mayor in the town of West Hartford, surpassing Godfrey Day, who served for 90 months, and he served from 1935 to 1943. Scott actually values something that Day said. As a Republican, he was a council president, actually. Mayor, I think, became, there was actually the first mayor in the late 1940s. But prior to Scott, he was recognized by the current as a very staunch believer in a non-political council administration. And that's exactly the way Scott has governed and the way he has led us all always looking to the future and to the best interest of the town, and not looking to tear somebody down or tear them apart. It's always to lift them up, and that he's done that around the table, and with actually everybody he's met in every commission and everywhere he goes, and he is truly valued. He is a corp counsel for Lego, but again, sometimes you would never understand, looking at what he juggles for the town, that he does that. He makes West Hartford better every day, and that is the most valuable thing that he has done for all the constituents in town, and he is recognized for that. He's recognized on a national level. The town has been recognized by so many accolades, but Scott also personally has been recognized. I just want to note during Scott's wash, we have seen Blueback Square obviously come to fruition and thrive. And it's already changed hands, and a very successful owner is very excited to take over and continue the success of Blueback Square. He weathered the 2008 financial crisis, which many municipalities did not handle well. We came out actually in a stronger position in many ways than we entered. We solidified our values. We scaled down. Really, we saved what we needed to save, and kind of let go of things that weren't essential. And then we kind of refocused and really became very mission oriented. And he really weathered the storm for the town. Irene and Alfred became, it was really a crisis. It was not anything like my parents, who had been here for 50 years, had ever seen. So it was earth-shattering in many ways, and Scott was there at the helm throughout the whole thing, and really made us all feel safe. And I call it the good night moon call that he would make to everybody, just saying, okay, tomorrow there's going to be another street up. So, and then of course canceling Halloween, he did not do lightly. So we were all in good hands, and obviously our management of town and Scott worked so closely together and really led us through some very difficult times. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that happened. Some of the awards that we've received, and many of you have known them. Family Circle magazine naming West Hartford one of the 10 best towns for families. Hartford Magazine's 2013 issue ranked us #1 overall large town category. Washington Post, the high schools, U.S. News Report. Again, this is a list of 14 now on the website, I think, and it continues to grow. But personally, one of the things that Scott has been recognized, he was recognized in 2008 as one of the 50 most influential people, which I think was pretty remarkable at the time. And he was also recognized as best community leader in 2013. And then under I don't even know if it's fully out yet, but the 40 under 40, maybe it is. I don't know. It's out. But outstanding young professionals in the Hartford area, and that's just a small snippet of the things that people think of him, and what and how people value him. When I travel with Scott, people will say to me that he is the best mayor in the state of Connecticut, and nationally. Nationally he is recognized and he is valued. And again, the most important traits and the things that I look at and I value so intensely is the civility with which he has governed for all these years. And as we look at our national landscape and what is happening to politics, and unfortunately I think a little bit we're going to probably see it on the state level very soon as election approaches, but Scott doesn't do that. That's not the way he plays the game. He does what he thinks is right, and so he can go to bed with a clear head and wake up in the morning proud of himself and proud of everybody around him and the town, and he's lifted us all up. I also want to thank Noel for making letting him perform in the way he's been able to perform, because it is really a sacrifice, and Betsy, who we all know and love, and it joins him at the hip very, very often. His whole family has become part of our family, and I really feel like I've gained a very dear friend, and almost like a sibling. We've shared a lot together over the past 10 years. But his parents, Janice and Bob, and his brother and sister-in-law, Jonathan and Andrea, have been in our homes, in our hearts, and rooting for all of us, and we really treasure their love, and this is a family. We have our own families. Obviously, we have this family, and we work together and treasure each other and try not to hurt each other along the way. And I hope that we can continue to be an example for the state and hopefully for the country to show how to get things done. And so I am so proud to nominate as president Scott Slifka.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and
Thank you. Mr. Captain, the second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to, I would like to second the nomination of Scott Slifka for president of the council. Sherry, you picked up on many of the things that we always talk about and say, and they're all very, very true, and people are going to think that we may have coordinated this. When I was trying to think of something to say about Scott, I reflected back that this is a very big week for our nation, a big month, a big year, remembering the assassination of President Kennedy, which will actually be on Friday, and it was a Friday 50 years ago. So I was looking for a quote from the president, and I actually found a quote that really resonated for me about Scott, and it was actually from Senator John F. Kennedy back in 1958. And what he said was, "Let us not despair, but act. Let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Let us not seek to fix the blame for the past. Let us accept our own responsibility for the future." And when I read that quote, I really thought of you and the way that you govern and the way that you lead our council and our town with civility and respect, with collaboration for others, both within our own party, with the opposing party, with people who oppose the way that we may think collaboratively as a group, and how you build consensus, and how you seek consensus on just about every single project that we work on, because you understand that every project or any project is more successful with the input of people and the support of many. And for that, I'm very proud to put in the nomination of my friend Mayor Scott Slifka for president.
Thank you. Thank you, both of you. I'm very touched. Are there any other nominations? Okay, then we'll close the nominations. And do we have to vote for me? I can't remember now. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much for that. So, before the meeting, Mr. Barnes said, "Oh, this must be old hat," and I told him I do forget the script despite this, and I'm proving it right now, so I wasn't kidding. Move to number 7, which is call for nomination for the vice president by the newly elected president, and I would like to entertain my prerogative to place a nomination for the position of vice president and deputy mayor of the council, my dear friend and colleague Sherry Cantor. First, I probably don't need any other reason to nominate her other than the remarks that she made about me a short time ago. Those are fantastic. But a few things that you all ought to know about Sherry. First, she's the second longest serving member of the council right now. She's served since 2004. And in 2011, on this night 2 years ago, she received a title she long deserved of deputy mayor. It's funny, Mr. Captain was saying it's going to sound like we coordinated, and it's going to sound, I can guarantee you, Mrs. Cantor and I didn't coordinate, but I am now going to say something that sounds exactly what she just said, which is there's an old saying that you don't get to pick your family, but there is a slight exception to that when it comes to the town council, because every once in a while there's a vacancy, and a group of us as a family gets to select who is the replacement. And sometimes that goes great, sometimes it's a challenge, but that action was the first major decision I had to make after I'd been mayor. If those who are kind of council historians recall that I became mayor after Jonathan Harris moved on to the state senate. So for a brief period of time we had 8 members of this body, and we were working on who the replacement would be, and it was a big deal. A lot of people who were interested, and I thought from the first moment that Sherry was the pick. I didn't know her before that process began, and I've said a couple times now that Sherry's heard, but maybe not everybody here has heard, is that I think that was about the first decision that I made as mayor, and to this day it remains the best decision that I made as mayor, to have Sherry become a member of this body. She has been my friend. She's been a partner. She said that she's been the sister that I never had. I too, I mean, I'm repeating this, I felt adopted by her entire family, her husband Michael, sons Josh, Sam, Ben, and Jake, and her parents, Mark and Rose, who are also wonderful, wonderful people. Sherry is a doer, and she's completely reliable, she's compassionate, and to her detriment, quite often politically, she does not seek credit for the work that she has done. She has taken on, over the years, the hardest tasks and the smallest tasks in the council, the ones that might have the most public profile and the ones that have absolutely none at all. From her first moments on the council, she took over the budget committee, the Finance and Budget Committee, and she's run it with great success ever since, and to great quiet acclaim from her colleagues, from management, from those who see her perform, from Standard & Poor's and Moody's. But not something that maybe the general public knew, and they should if they don't already. But she's also taken on little things that nobody has any idea that she does. She constantly attends the Senior Citizen Advisory Commission meetings. She has helped keep alive a pet project of mine, which is the ITN, and we talked about it at our last council meeting. And why does she do this? It's because she cares, and she particularly cares about seniors because she's watching what her parents go through. And she's one of those people that you hope that people who come to this body, a lot like what Mr. Adler was saying as he left, that you will not forget your real life experiences when you get up here. You will not forget the people that either you meet by door knocking or simply the ones that you have in your daily life, and some you may be related to who struggle with an issue here and there, and that you bring that to bear when you can to influence public policy. And she does that, and does a lot of it because she is watching what her parents go through. She has also taken on the poet laureate thing. I mean, talk about a wide-ranging portfolio. Usually they say, the phrase a Renaissance man, but she's a Renaissance woman. She's running the budget committee, and she's also in charge of picking the poet laureate. That's a pretty wide gulf of responsibility. But bottom line is, I cannot imagine how differently the council would have been and how the town would have turned out had I not helped play a role in choosing Sherry to join this council 9 years ago. I'm eternally grateful that she said yes. We kid about this, but a couple of us, myself and Chuck Corsi in particular, did lie to her about the time commitment and other things. We successfully pulled it off, and then Sherry and I duplicated it a couple of years later to get Mrs. Casperson to join us. And you see, sometimes lying is good for the community's benefit. But I think few people, if you haven't served on the council, the board, or some elected body like this, have the experience that I have had and others here have had, which is really unique. So where, number one, you get to serve in a body like this, and that's incredibly unique in and of itself. But when you get to do it with people you consider your trusted friends, it's a whole nother level of experience. When you get to go make these difficult decisions with people that you know and love and trust, it really is special, and that sums up how I feel about Sherry. And so I'm very excited to nominate her for another term as deputy mayor and to have her back for another 2 years. Thank you. And is there a second? Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second the nomination of Sherry Cantor as Vice President of the Town Council and to serve as Deputy Mayor for another term. I think we all know that Sherry has grown up in West Hartford. West Hartford is her home. She's a lifelong resident of West Hartford. She's family-oriented, as the mayor alluded to, with her husband Michael, her parents, and her 4 boys, Josh, Sam, Ben, and Jacob. And they do everything as a family. And the Cantors sort of live towards one of my adages that the most important people live within the 4 walls of their home, but they take it a little bit further, and they basically do things for our community and make that wall of their home our community. And as I was told in 7th grade by one of my teachers, and I'll just paraphrase because it will be more appropriate, it does not take great people to do great things. It takes dedicated people. And Sherry Cantor, in my opinion and the opinion of others sitting around this table, is probably one of the most dedicated individuals to our community. And in addition to having a professional background as a CPA with expertise in financial matters, she's been a volunteer in our school system. She has volunteered with our Senior Citizens Advisory Commission. She brought the Heart Safe Community program to our employees and to our community to raise awareness on how important it is to be heart smart. She recently introduced the Pink Barrel trash can program to raise awareness about breast cancer. She was instrumental in bringing back a very crucial program to our town, the Seniors Jobs Bank, which matches seniors with people looking for services. And in her spare time, she's a trustee on the board for the University of Connecticut and ASD, and she has leadership roles in a variety of Jewish community organizations. In all my dealings with Sherry, I found her to always be compassionate, caring, generous, reliable. And when you go to a finance and budget meeting, you notice her skill, her grace, and her professionalism. My first 2 years on the council, we took a trip to New York to meet with one of the bond rating agencies. And it's a long ride down and back, but you really get into good conversations and you really see the essence of what somebody's about. And basically it was, what's good for West Hartford? What's going to really make our community the community that I want to live in and the community that we all want to live in? And Sherry just basically has all those qualities wrapped up into her persona to make West Hartford the best place ever. And as often is said, we all try to make West Hartford the best place to raise a family, to work, and to live. And Sherry has led by example during her tenure on the council, and I'm certain in the next 2 years as deputy mayor, she will continue to serve the West Hartford residents to the best of her ability, and we will all be proud to call her our deputy mayor and vice president of this town council.
Okay, if there are no other nominations, we'll close the nominations. And all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. Now, the agenda we have this evening is largely dictated by what is in the charter, but there's a position that is not recognized by the charter, but for many years we have recognized it because it's important. Is the position of minority leader, and so we'd like to announce that Mrs. Hall has been nominated by her colleagues to serve another term as minority leader, and I think this will give you the longest tenure. I believe, in that position, at least off my memory and I think Essie's memory, but we're making history. So congratulations and welcome back. We move to number 8, which is the appointment of the council clerk. I'd like to entertain a motion to appoint our town clerk, Essie LeBreau, as the council clerk.
Don't. So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. I guess congratulations, Mrs. LeBreau. I'd like to move adoption of the temporary rules, and those are the rules that are listed. Sorry. Everybody get them? No, we had them. There are the standing rules of the town council, which at the header it says standing rules of West Hartford Town Council for the 2011-2013 term. We will adopt these as the temporary rules, and they will be updated by Ms. LeBreau. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Now we move to the appointment of rules committees. These fall to me, so we announce them and not move them. The rules committee will be composed of myself as the chair, Mrs. Cantor, and Mrs. Hall. And we will next appoint the council committees. These are the standing committees of the council. And for the second time in a row, I want to thank Mrs. Hall for making the job easier because she created the document. So for all these things, we seem like a big city sometimes, but actually it was Denise at work putting together a Word document and sending it to me. And I'm sorry, not at work. During lunch, it was lunch. There was a date stamp. It was like 12:32, I think, if I recall. I will testify to that if Webster Bank calls. The Administration and Technology Committee will have Claire Kindle as chair, myself, and Chris Barnes. Community Planning and Physical Services Committee, Leon Davidoff chair, Claire Kindle, and Denise Hall. Education Liaison Committee, myself as chair, Denise Hall, and Chris Barnes. Finance and Budget Committee, Mrs. Cantor as chair, Harry Captain, and Chris Barnes. Government Liaison Committee, myself as chair, Mrs. Cantor, and Burke Dorr. Human Services Committee, Judy Casperson, chair, Sherry Cantor, and Burke Dorr. Public Safety Committee, Harry Captain as chair, myself, and Burke Dorr. Rules Committee we covered, and this is not for appointment officially tonight, but just for those who watch us. We will be reauthorizing, I will be reauthorizing at the conclusion of the meeting, the Registrar of Voters Operations Review Committee, which is not a council standing committee, it's a special committee, but I will continue to be the chair, and Mrs. Hall will continue to join me on that committee. So that concludes the appointment of committees. We move on to we do have, for some technical reasons, some actual new business this evening. So number 12, Mrs. Cantor.
Number 12, application on behalf of 24 North Main Street LLC, owner and intended developer of 24 North Main Street for approval of special development district and underlying RO zone to remove the existing building located on the property to construct a new apartment building containing 18 residential units. The redeveloped property will be known as 24 North Main Street. I move that we set for public hearing on January 14th at 7 p.m. And refer to TPZ and DRAC.
Second.
The motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Now I'd like to entertain a motion to, this is a funny one, to suspend the rules to receive Chris Barnes' resignation from the Risk Management Advisory Board. Yes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. And Mr. Barnes, I was advised by Corp Counsel, you cannot vote on receiving your own resignation. I don't think we've ever had this happen before. So,
draw that vote.
Yes. I'd like to entertain a motion to receive Mr. Barnes' resignation from the Risk Management Advisory Board.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. This brings us just about to adjournment, but by tradition, this is where the mayor has made a few comments to kick off the new term, and I will attempt to keep this as brief as possible. First, I want to point out two historical facts in addition to some of the other ones that I've pointed out already this evening, courtesy of S.E. LeBreau. First, it looks like this is the greatest number of incumbents that have returned to a town council, and as far as we can tell in the town's history. There may be something far back we haven't figured out yet, but interesting note for tonight. Second, that she discovered that in 1855, I think in the first ever meeting of the town council, or one of the first, the West Hartford Town Selectmen, that is what we were known as at the time, voted to allow $1.25 per day for their services. Now, we don't get that today, and I didn't calculate for inflation, but for those that might get excited by that, for the next 2 years, that would come out to $912.50 for all of this. I have not calculated the hourly rate, though, on that. On a personal level, I have a few thank yous. I'd like to make first to the residents of West Hartford for your support. To my wife Noelle and to Betsy, who are at home because it's now well past 9 and Betsy's 5, and that's probably not the best combination, and Duffy's school would probably be a little concerned if she was out a little later. But for allowing me the time away to continue to do this, it is a sacrifice, but the sacrifice is all borne by them. And if I did not have them supporting me, and my parents and my brother John and sister-in-law Andrea, who've done this for years as well, there's no way that I could continue to serve, and I'm eternally grateful to all of them and love them all. Betsy and I had an interesting conversation last night because I tested whether she might be interested in coming, and I'm looking at your daughter, Harry, as I laugh about this, and Betsy actually said, she said, what's a swearing in? I said, interesting. So I explained it to her briefly, and she said, that sounds boring. And as you've all noticed, it is. But then I mentioned that there might be cake afterward, and she smiled. She said, well, that's not boring at all. Any meeting that has cake is not boring. So alas, she is not here tonight. I think she's in the bath right now, but she's here in spirit. And I want to thank all my colleagues for those who agreed to return for another 2 years, and Mr. Barnes for now, and his family for joining us as well. Tonight we're continuing West Hartford's tradition of a volunteer council supported by a first-class administration and led by the best town manager in the state, in Ron Van Winkle. Yes. And we'll have time to give a tribute to him when we have to, council has to, by charter, officially appoints the corporation council in December, so that there's some continuity. So we'll talk about Mr. O'Brien then, but I want to point out that he is the only person who has served with me at this table since 2001. So Joe, that's quite a duration. Thank you.
Great 12 years.
Thank you. But as much continuity as we appear to have, it's interesting to note how much change we've had over the last few years, particularly at the level of our directors in town. Many names that are known by you and you at home. We said goodbye to Chris Johnson, Rob Rolson, Dana Hallenbeck, Bill Austin, Milla Limson, Jim Strelacci, and Jim Capides. We said hello to John Phillips, Tracy Gove, Gary Allen, Helen Rubino Turco, Mark McGovern, Peter Privatera, and Todd Dumay. As a few mentioned this evening, next year Tom Moore will replace Dr. Karen List as our superintendent. And even among this group, though 8 of us are back, 4 members of this body have only been on it since 2011. A majority of us have only been on since 2009, and all but 2 of us joined in 2007, or since 2007. And on a few recent occasions, I've been asked to reflect and comment on what makes West Hartford so unique. Not asked that question often, and I had to ponder it. It was interesting. And to paraphrase Helen Rubino Turco, who's one of our directors but been active in town for many, many years, said that living in West Hartford is not a spectator sport. It's a sophisticated community where the residents care about what is happening and take personal responsibility for the success of the community. Our residents act like stakeholders who recognize and understand the limitations of our institutions. They step up and fill gaps rather than acting like passive shareholders. Their contributions are individualized and need not be large and public, like being on the town council, for instance. In a community like ours, everyone contributes what they can and where they have unique talents. The sum of these contributions is what creates a great and balanced community. A great community needs all of these people, so each contribution is equally important. And I found that West Hartford obviously does not have a moral code, but we create a culture of sorts through our actions. It sets the tone for what we believe in as a community. So based on this, I'd like to offer some suggestions and challenges to myself and my colleagues based on what I think the community expects of us. And it's not the first time I've shared some of these, and most of the time we get it right, and sometimes we don't, but I'd like to offer them again. So, let's not treat our colleagues like opponents simply because they have a different party label. Let's not reflexively criticize an idea simply because it was proposed by someone with a different party label or because it doesn't fit our prescribed ideology or that of our respective town committee. Let's not be divisive for the sake of being divisive, looking only at an advantage for the next election and ignoring the long-term ramifications of our actions, like whether people want to continue to serve in an all-volunteer town council. And let's remember that today's elected leader was once, and may still be, a coworker, a neighbor, a coach, or a teacher, and not a faceless partisan who must be undermined or humiliated for political sport. This past council worked very well together and in a civil manner. And I want to emphasize the word worked. We accomplished a great deal, even in an election year. And in doing so, we provided a great contrast to what is happening on the national level. Going forward, for all the awards we have justifiably won and the accolades that we've received, we also face, as all municipalities do, numerous challenges, particularly on the fiscal front. There may be disagreement as to what and how, but not whether action is necessary. We must be responsive, erase party lines, and justify the faith of our residents that we will act and not posture, to work and not fight, to get something done and not merely debate. Based on past experience and on the character and the intellect of those at this table, I have faith that this group will rise to the occasion. So thank you again to our residents for your faith in us, to my colleagues and to their families, and God bless the town of West Hartford. And with that, nobody else has to do this after they give some address like that. I have to call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for joining us.